Okay, welcome to my evaluation of the performance and the process. I'm just going to do them in one video because it's easier just to have it all in one video. So the evaluation is just looking back over what was good, what was bad, etc, etc. So looking back over the whole project, and I'll do more overall evaluation towards the end of this, but it's been long, obviously, but it's been a brilliant learning experience. Obviously, I'm in college, but I really learned a lot about myself, how I work in a team, and stuff like that. So, looking back over the process, let's do process first. So good things during the process was us working as an ensemble in the costume team. So obviously there were moments where we weren't the best because, you know, we're human. But overall, we really pulled together as a team during times of crisis. So, for example, when we had to come up with Lysandra's costume, we all sat round as a team and decided it then and there. Even at the beginning of the process, when we needed to decide the groups, we all sat down and decided it then and there, and we all had our allocated groups to be getting on with. And there were tensions at some point when, you know, there'd be a couple of us really hard working and people sat there doing nothing, but wherever there was slack, we all picked it up. Our dynamics within the team were really good throughout the process. We worked well as individuals doing our own thing, but also then coming together. Another good thing was us working well as a company. So that means us as a costume team working really well with our creative director, being able to have quick chats with him, meetings, responding to notes the way we needed to, and then obviously getting that from our head of the costume team, lecturer Bex. So working really well there, but also us working well with stage management because they have all the props, you know, making sure we've got things the same colour, swapping jobs that we can do, offering to just thread something when, like, literally when we were all sat in the workshop, I just was threading needles for some of the boys and talking about colour schemes and stuff like that, and how, like, for the lovers they had to bring flowers and stuff to wear on them, go over them, so talking about what colours we could put on top of the pinks we've already got on the lovers. And then also working as a company with all the rest of the lecturing team, so working with dance to talk about the trousers and the knee pads and being barefoot with Catherine and Emma, but also the dancers, and like asking about problem areas on their feet where we can wrap. But then obviously working with the actors as well, very much at the beginning of the process with the fittings, talking to them about what they're comfortable with their body, and then also what they're comfortable with, not what they're comfortable, how they think their character would dress, and any ideas they have, because actors need to be part of the creative process as well. I'm a strong believer of that. And then also later on in the process, grabbing them for fittings and, you know, asking how it fits, asking if they can do proper movements in it, asking them if this is something they imagine, does this fit the character that they saw, this is things like that. So I think, yeah, we as a company as a whole really worked well throughout the process. We started off as individuals at the start, but once we were all down in Emmanuel Hall and then moving into the barn field, yeah, brilliant work as a company. Next, I say we met the brief really well. So the making Midsummer Night's Dream to a modern audience, I definitely agree with that, and I do go into this a little bit later as well, but I'd definitely agree that yes, we really met the brief. I've said this before, I've had several people come to me who'd seen the show saying how visually stunning it was. If you read all the articles and feedback we've had, loads of it saying that we really managed to modernise Midsummer Night's Dream, not just with the like change in gender, but with the use of movement and how the costumes fit that. Another good thing was the level of professionalism I learnt throughout. So when we were in the CCI, it started very much still feeling like college work, and of course this is college work, but we're working in a practical way. So obviously, like, once we were out of the CCI and into the Emmanuel Hall and Barnfield, really being able to go between joking from my friends about how it's college work and like just being a college student to then being a professional who needs to do her job. And I've spoken about this in practically every single one of my vlogs, because professionalism was one of my big targets. But yes, I definitely feel like we, especially working towards the end of the process, obviously were really working towards the professionalism that an official show would require. Another good thing was our responding and working on feedback. So with, like, that's another thing that I learned throughout the course, throughout the term, is to not, I like really grew as a person. I don't want to be that cliched, but I did. And not taking feedback emotionally to heart, and also not like taking it as a criticism, and then being able to just be like, yeah, I can fix that. And that starts from the beginning of the process, changing our designs around what the creative director thinks, changing colours and stuff like that, to then things like adjusting costumes to fit the people, that like adjusting things like physically with sewing and stuff like that, and then other things like tweaking designs, especially during the tech as well. So yeah, good at responding to feedback as well by the end of it. Some more of the bad side of it, because everything wasn't perfect. So what didn't go so well was, first thing I've got is emotional. And this is another thing I learned throughout the piece, is it's really important to take care of your emotions and your mental health during a process like this. And I certainly did to an extent. I mean, I'm aware of mental health issues. I've had them all my life, so I know how to deal with them. But when it's so intense for either such a long period of time or such a short period of time, because we'd have weeks and weeks and weeks of stress and stress and stress, but then we'd also have like 2 days where we had to get everything done. So dealing with the emotional side of that, I didn't do so hot. I was, not very emotionally stable for a lot of it, and I let that influence some of my actions sometimes. So I'd get, like I was saying, I'd get upset by certain bits of feedback, and obviously now that I've been through a whole term of this and understand how to act professionally about all this, and I've experienced it, like work experience, I know that if we were to do the exact same thing again, I'd be a lot better emotionally, but I'd make the conscious awareness of my emotions, and like I can now be able to understand that, oh, these are my emotions influencing my decision making, not my practical skills and critical thinking. So yeah, that's what would be better. Another one was the stress at the Barnfield, so kind of leading in from the point I was just saying about how, especially once in the Barnfield, and this can be a little performance, but I'll talk about the get-in more. Sorry about my dog barking. But basically how when we were all in there, and once all the actors were there as well, once the full company, I said at one point how it felt like a prison because of all of the same cinder block coloured walls, how the floor was all the same, and you had no room to go and chill in, especially when actors were using our room as a common room. So I think something that I'd focus on next, if we would do the whole process again, was to be able to give myself that space more, and I talk about this more later, but bringing things that I know help, because of my ADHD, I know help isolate me and give me the room without actually having to go and leave the room, because that's just not feasible in such a small theatre. Another bad thing that we'd said happened as a costume team, whilst we worked really well professionally as a company, we felt we were a bit isolated from the cast. So this is both timetable and our own doing. So in the CCI, obviously everyone was working down in Emmanuel Hall. We didn't see them, that's not our fault, that's fair enough. But when we did go down to Emmanuel Hall, we spent a lot of our time away in the dungeon room that we called it, which was underground and isolated and out of the way, and then not really spending time in the green room, you know, trying to go up to the kitchen when no one was there to make lunch, and then hiding away in the workshop again. So that when it did become time for the Barnfield, you know, we bonded with the cast, certainly. We bonded with the actors, and people we already knew as well from the first year. But we did have a feeling of being isolated and how we'd done that to ourselves. So next time, I feel like we did well as an ensemble and a company as a whole, but next time, or if I were to do the process again, I'd make the effort to be more friendly with the people and get to know them, not only as actors but also as friends, because there's some really great people in that cast. One of the last bad things I have is burning out. So this happened a lot. This stretched over a massive, almost like term and a half, I don't know. We had a few half terms within the process of it, and I found that when we did have them, I'd spend all my time inside, spend all my time like recuperating, because I'd stress myself out and burn myself out. And that was happening at the beginning with needing to get final designs in time. I'd spend nights awake. So I think it's a point of my time management as well. I'd spend like a whole night awake before the meeting, just making sure everything was okay. I had everything there, but because I stressed about it so much, going over it and making sure it was all perfect. So I think it's a case of next time to not burn myself out and go crazy and I need like breaks and stuff all the time, is to time manage myself so that I have the time to double check, because that's something I learned about myself as well, especially in the Barnfield, is I like having time to check. I like having time to make sure everything's okay, just to like double tap. It's like when you check a door's locked and then you check it again just to make sure, and that's something I like to be able to do. So next time it's about time managing throughout the whole process to be able to do that. Okay, moving on, how I responded to the brief, make Midsummer Night's Dream, bringing Midsummer Night's Dream to a modern cast. And I touched on this earlier, saying how obviously we did it with things like gender, so the gender bind class casting, but also using gender stereotypes against themselves. So like Lysandra in trousers, Aegeus in a kilt, you know, because even though Aegeus is a homophobic, like literally we used homophobic as a word from our creative director, but homophobic and bigoted, there's still the power in the kilt and how it's a very traditional male Scottish thing. But then things like still choosing to put Helena in a skirt because she's pregnant, and there's that more natural femininity from that, but then combating all these gender stereotypes with the queerness of the show, but also with like putting people in trousers and putting people in corsets whilst in a skirt and different things like that, playing with non-binary fashion. And I feel like that's one of the things that really brought it forward to a modern audience. Another thing I've written is how about multiculturalism, how obviously at the beginning of the brief I wanted my ideas were to have like each of the groups from different cultures in Asia and different cultures around the world, and obviously that didn't happen in the end. That was scrapped, it was never considered. It's fine. But I feel like we still got that multiculturalism with the Supernaturals. They had they had a, whilst traditional but also modern Indian feel to them. They had the look of like street children, but also Titania looked very refined with the body paint as well, working with the Native American stuff in a respectful manner was really something that I feel we did well to bring it to a modern audience, because like our society is no longer just white, it's no longer straight and white, it's multicultural, it's gay, it's non-binary. So we also just looked very fresh. I find the vibrancy of the colours we used made it look very refreshing when we could have gone for duller, more forest colours. And even when we did go for like greys and browns for the fairies, they still looked very vibrant because of the choice of body paint. and lights as well that were used on stage, and just the abstractness of what we did to the show in general. So I think we responded to the brief very, very well. So moving on to research. So I'm going to talk a little bit about research, not too bad. So just talking about research we did throughout the process. So the biggest one for me was the fairies tribal paint. So I did a lot of intense research into the meanings, loads of different pages on the internet, lots of different photos I could gather, but also looking in the RAM for inspiration on patterns and lines and, you know, textures almost. And then not only making sure that everything had a meaning on the paint, all the meanings were valid. So like 2 dots under Titania's eye meant parent. She had at one point a new flower moon on her forehead, and some of Puck's like designs on his arm and here meant like shaman, which was, you know, dealer of magic and things like that, which are all annotated on the face chart designs. But then also making sure that when I did use, you know, just decorative things like lines and doodles and stuff like that, more so on the you know, ensemble fairies, they were paint that was meant for decoration. It wasn't I was just accidentally drawing, you know, Firekeeper on a fairy. I was actually drawing on them just something that Native American and African tribes had used for decoration, so I was never disrespecting the culture. I also made sure that there was lots of significance on Titania, Oberon and Puck. So things like Oberon had a symbol on him, like a line here that meant war chief, which basically meant he was only in charge of Puck and only was in charge of a small section because he was arguing with Titania. Because from the character research I'd done beforehand during Unit 7, I really thought that Titania was the one in control. Titania was like she was a badass and stuff like that. That's why she had symbols like warrior around her wrist and stuff like that, which is just a line. But then also for like Puck, like with the shaman thing, he had lines here as well, which meant game player, because I feel like that's, whilst it can be like sporty, it's also very much he's playing a game, he's manipulating people, and he's having fun. He's a very mischievous character. So making sure that the meanings were really coming, even like, I know the audience isn't going to understand them, but if they do look them up, if anyone's got any awareness of it, and just for respect of the culture, that they had meanings with the significance drawn on Titania, Oberon and Puck. And then for the rest of Titania's fairies, using inspiration from her designs for the other fairies. So, for example, for Bee and Firefly, who were 2 of the most significant fairies throughout the show, her, like, side fairies, they got to have, like, the parent motif on this, and they also had like dots above their eyebrows, which Titania didn't have, but is pulled from, like, the fairies have been mimicking her designs, or Titania has told them that they need to show their loyalty to her through these body paints that all the other fairies would understand. So yeah, and then with the common fairies, after drawing the significance onto those ones, using other symbols like Fisher, so like not necessarily, none of them were like fishermen, but using the name, so like Venus flytrap traps things and catches them, so maybe they have the Fisher motif on them Fisher design on them because it's one that was used among common people, so it was lesser ranking, but also it fit kind of with the name. Just a little nod to all the meanings behind them. So then from that, talking about like how I let the characters, the research I'd done on the characters influence the designs and the makeup. So for Polly Quince, my own personal mechanical that I designed, choosing to make sure that her figure had that very powerful look with strong shapes and like straight lines, but then the curve as well with the waistcoat. So doing a lot of research into theatre ushers, and trying to understand how I can translate that into the denim look, but also still get the powerful edge, but also the make men do. So pulling together all these different aspects through all this research to try and make the perfect costume, which I believe I did. She had the waistcoat, the tie, the skirt, which gave her that powerful figure. It was all in denim, so it fit the colours, but also I did the research of almost pantomime-y in the button character, how they always got the big patches and then the big frayed patches at the end, thinking about how I could lean into that comedy from that, and how the mechanicals play itself is a little bit pantomime-y. So then putting aspects of the patches on her and fraying them, but also so it still fit the character research I'd done of the mechanicals in general, that she was desperate to keep her job, and in a quick fix grabbed any colour denim, anything that fit the look of her skirt, and patching it on just so she doesn't look messy. Well, doesn't have holes in her skirt, you know. And that's the same with the patches on the elbows, like the worn down feel, but without losing the power behind that figure. So then I also wanted to talk about some research ideas of mine that got rejected. So obviously the multiculturalism with the different Asian groups, because I feel that was rejected, and for good reason, because then it would just all be Asian and no one in the cast, we're a white cast, so I feel like that would be a little bit disrespectful, but still using different motifs and designs within the piece, and then drawing that multiculturalism into, so adapting my idea and drawing it more into the supernaturals instead of the cast as a whole. Another idea that got rejected was Kieran came up with the idea that the mechanicals could possibly have clown makeup on, and then Nige liked the idea of them putting it on stage, because originally the entire cast were just going to sit in the wings instead of having a backstage, and that idea got scrapped. People were allowed to go backstage. People rarely sat in the wings. They only came on to sing and they went off again. So that meant they couldn't do it on stage. And also the clown makeup that I designed, looking into face shapes that I could distort and exaggerate for Polly Quinn. So putting her eyebrows down to show the anger, and sharp lines and contour to show that power once again, because she's in control of the mechanicals, but it's still clown makeup. But got scrapped because there wasn't time. They had to come off and put on. There wouldn't be time in the show before their last appearance as a group outside of their little play, and then their being on for the play, because they also had to put on other costumes and things like that. So the clown got rejected. Also, another idea that got rejected was a henna design for the fairies, just to bring them back to that Indian inspiration, but it wouldn't have been seen from stage because of the intricate details. So instead, it's seeing where else I could put the flower motif on Titania. So then, problem solving. What was my attitude towards problem solving? I'd say my attitude towards actually solving the problems that came up was very positive. So spoken about taking on feedback and how I struggled with that at the beginning, but when it came to problems that came up naturally, I found it was very positive. I was very excited to do that. Obviously taking on feedback better throughout the process, but I was very, down to, very down to do so. So some examples of some problem solving I have is right at the beginning of the process, when we'd all had our basic designs and colours done, learning that the supernaturals were grey instead of white because of the moon, so then adapting to fit that, to change the colour, and then exploring different colours of greys, and then putting over on and parking the brown. Another problem we had was not knowing much about the actors' opinions on the characters, but also not knowing about actors' body confidence and stuff like that. So then just interviewing them when we did the fittings and preparing questions in advance so that we could write them on the back of their measurement sheets so that we'd know when we were making the costumes. Another one was actors feeling uncomfortable being measured in front of everyone, being asked these body confidence issues in front of everyone, or being uncomfortable answering the questions, so always giving them the option to go into a separate room away from everybody else for the fitting, but also to have someone else asking the questions or to just not answer them. Another problem we had was our first set of final designs were very mood boardy, and that's not what Nigel wanted. He wanted sketches. So our response to that was to redo the final designs and sketch them, and also reschedule the meeting so that we'd have time to do that. Another problem we had was I was focused on makeup at the beginning, when in reality we needed to focus on costume more. So after having a chat with Rosie about it, I adapted myself to work more as a team and to focus on the costume, and understanding that there will be a chance for makeup towards the end, just not right now. So then other problem, Lysandra's costume not being up to the character, like good enough for the character, the design that we had, so all sitting together as a team and deciding it. Obviously just making adjustments to anything that needed to be adjusted, that's a problem that we solved. The fairy shirts, Kieran being bombarded with not enough time to do the trousers, so me taking on the fairy shirts instead of him. Having a low budget for the makeup, so getting the cast to bring in as much as their own makeup that they could. And then, like, Frankie Flute's costume design, how it looked very bare and dull on stage, so then changing it to fit the character more and redesigning it in the last moment and then sourcing it the same day. And then, obviously, another problem was the Moon needed her makeup done, but we didn't have time to teach at the workshop, so me volunteering to come in every night. Okie dokie. Let's move on. More problem-solving things. Oh, I still chocolate so much. Oh, I might have to split this video into two. Okay. So let me pop this one down. I had a little sheet. I'm so professional. So another thing with problem-solving was what we've learned throughout the process. So I've spoke briefly on this, not briefly. Learned to not take feedback learned to not take feedback as an insult or to heart, to just act on it, because it's not creatively sound and it needs to be. I've also got, with all the problem solving that I'm doing, I've been a lot more confident in my decision making skills, and being able to just decide right then and there, or talk it out with my team very quickly, or, you know, decide this needs to be done and thought out properly, so we're making the decision to leave this for now and then we can talk about it. So going off of that, also having a real grow in my quick thinking skills. So compared to the last couple terms, it's been like my quick thinking skills have been a lot more like more valuable, a lot better, because I could work in quick practical situations, and there are a lot more quick little fires for me to put out, as opposed to, you know, in the last term they were long-term problems that needed to be, you know, figured out over a long time thing. So that was a problem that we could solve over a long time period, and whilst that's very important, I think the quick thinking is a lot more helpful for me to learn, because it helps me work in a professional environment now. I already had the long term decision problem solving before from all the other shows I'd been in, but now this quick one, and I had a problem with it beforehand, you know. I had a problem with my anxiety and not thinking my decision was good enough, so second guessing myself, and I just said so much better now after this term, because I've learned how to just be like, no, this is my decision and this is what's happening, and being confident in that. So that's something I've learned from my problem solving skills. I'll run through targets. Well, not quickly, it's not quick at all. So all of my short-term targets, I'm going to go through all of them and saying how well I met them. So the first one was divide work into groups, and divide the work and the cast into groups, so with the nobles, the lovers, supernaturals, etc., in a timely and reasonable manner. I said we did it timely because we did it in one session after a meeting, really quickly, just going, I want to do that, you want to do that, you can do that. And then reasonable, things like Kieran and me on supernaturals, because I had already done so much, not so much, but I was already beginning to look into the tribal pain, and those were the only characters that would have it. And Kieran was colourblind, so working with mainly in a group that were grey and like white and stuff like that was just a lot easier, so it's reasonable. Another short-term target was to have well-researched mood boards. I've got absolutely loads of mood boards, loads of pictures that I just shoved on a Google document. The only one thing I could say about that target is I'd want potentially use more sources, and maybe look into using like books and stuff like that instead of just the website, instead of just the internet, and also the RAM, and also maybe having a bigger range of resources as well, like I said. Another short-term target was to be meaningful and respectful of the culture, and obviously I did loads of research and visited actual museums to do that, so I say I definitely did that. And like I said, most of the tribal paint had meanings, and if it was for decoration, it was decorative things. It was never slapped on just because it looked good. It always had a meaning and was being respectful of the culture. Another short-term target was to remain professional in fittings. So this was asking the questions that we did, and then asking permission to touch them, asking permission, you know, saying that they don't have to answer the questions if they don't want to, saying that none of us are judging you, and then offering the separate rooms as well, remaining professional. Another one, short-term target, was to get my designs signed off. And so after, you know, we had the mood board problem with the first design meeting, we did get this done by just doing sketches and rescheduling the meeting for when it was fully done and getting that done, so met that short-term target. Another one was work on director's notes. So that was constant changements and adjustments from feedback, and I've spoke about my changing to the feedback, and how throughout the process I had like a more mature reaction to it, a more professional reaction to it, and willing to do so more instead of being stubborn about it and fighting for it. So yeah, definitely met my target of working director's notes. Another one was to keep the costume dungeon organised, so this was done by the designs all being put up on the walls in the groups that they're in, so mechanicals were there, nobles were there, lovers were there, things like that. Then having the whole team's to-do list on the wall that we were constantly updating and crossing things off. Having the budget on the wall, which didn't stay up to date because we started buying stuff online, but still having that there so we could see the goal we were working to. We constantly had exam criteria so we could read it and decide if we're taking the correct notes to be able to put this all up on our websites, to see if we're working in the professional manner that we need to, if our ideas are creative and stuff like that. And then when it did get too busy and too full in the workshop, and we were starting to face disorganisation in the dungeon and starting to face disorganisation, moving up into the workshop to be able to spread out and use the massive amount of hangers and do more work on the floor. Another one was to continue to work as an ensemble. There were a couple blips, obviously, a couple moments where we had tensions because, let's be real, we're all teenagers, we're all college students, we're all people, but we did pull together and move past that. Like, our end result was amazing. All the costumes looked absolutely stunning on stage, and we really supported each other as a team. So, like, picking up slack where it wasn't, or helping out someone when they were busy with other things, like with the fairies trousers and the t-shirts, and me doing those little hand sewing things that I could to help out. And then just learning to put the team first, which I did towards the end, like with the whole makeup being put to one side thing, learning to, you know, decide what needed to be done as a team instead of what needed to be done for me. Another short-term goal was to finish the denim patches, which I did in the barn field. I didn't do it in the EH, I did it in the spare time I had in the barn field. And then also, instead of having to hand fray them, I found that all the edges frayed naturally in the wash anyway, so finding the quicker, better way to do that. Finish my final makeup designs. I did with time at the end. Every actor that used makeup had face charts on in front of their mirror, and if not, they had a general one. So for like the wedding planners, they had one that they all used, and they had photos that they could work off as well, and they all got signed off after Nigel see them on stage and the tech. So yeah, finished makeup designs. Designed the moon makeup. I did that whilst in a dress. I did it with links to Titania and Oberon because they were obviously praising the moon, so having the dots there for parent, but also because the moon takes a mother role for Helena, and still having the tribal designs but not in white, so it isn't too much of like, so it doesn't look like she's a fairy, so using a silver glitter instead. And then also doing makeup that accentuated her features, so making sure that the dark eyeshadows were only on the outside centre, so it didn't sink her eyes in, but rather brought her eyes out of her face, and accentuated the lovely like facial expressions that Alice was doing. Another short-term target was to problem solve. This was more so in the in the barn field. So fixing all the problems that came up. We didn't have a problem that didn't get fixed, which I'm sure that we did. Like, I'm sure I thought was going to happen but didn't. And then fixing all the problems in the dress and the tech with like the cape, and just being able to decide like, no, that it's too short notice to be able to do the cape, let's highlight Titania in another way, or, you know, sewing Cam's jeans so that they broke on time, and things like that, and redesigning Flo's costume. And then my last short-term target was to stay organised and level-headed. So I stayed organised in the barn, because this was a short target towards the end of the process. So staying organised in the barn field was with my whiteboard. It meant that I could always look at the whiteboard and see where we were and remain level-headed and calm, and see how much we needed to do and what time, and getting it all done. I did take space when it needed. I'd go into the kitchen, make myself a cup of tea, classic. And then we also kept the room and desk very tidy, so knew where everything was. My desk, personally, I had in the costume office. I always had like a pile of makeup wipes, and then the makeup I needed for the moon, and then like hairbrushes and stuff like that over there, and then grips in there, so that when an actor came in frantically being like, I need some hair grips, we could be like, it's in that box there, here you go. So staying organised and level-headed in that way. I'm almost done. I'm not almost done. Okay, I've got about a page and a half left of process, and then I'll do performance in a separate one. So then, long-term targets. My first long-term target I have was to remain professional and not let my emotions control me. So I made this a long-term target because it was a struggle at the start of the process. I think it's something I decided very early on in the process that I needed to be able to think above my emotions when it was needed. So I was written that I was professional when it counted. So at the beginning, towards the fittings, like being able to be like, this is uncomfortable, I'm touching someone, I'm asking them questions about their body confidence, but not being like, I'm sorry, this is so weird, oh my god, I'm giggling and stuff like that. Just asking them the questions and getting straight answers from them in a timely, quick manner. I was definitely in control of my emotions and stress leading up to the end of the process. So in the barn field, once again, staying organised really helped me control all the stresses I would have had, but also, once again, taking breaks, remaining level-headed. I've said I was very professional in Emmanuel Hall and the barn field, so very professional in like going out of the fittings that we were having, and organising with Bex and Nige, and like not debating but figuring it out and working with them and justifying myself about the makeup workshops, and then asking professional questions when I was in the fittings about like where their feet hurt, if they had the resources they needed, like sports bras and stuff like that. And then the leadership role I took on down in the barn field once the makeup workshops had started. So asking people to do little things while I was doing makeup, and then that continued over to show week because I was the only one that was there every night. So rolling over to show week and my leadership role and the professionalism I took on, which was like telling people like what jobs still needed to be doing, so no one was sat doing nothing. Making sure everyone had done what little roles they had every night, and if someone wasn't there to do a job that they always did, making sure we had someone there that could do that job. Okay, another long-term goal was to stay organised, because I'm very much either an extremely messy person or a very organised person. So at the beginning of the process I was like, no, I'm not going to let this get messy, because if I do, I'll like have a breakdown, because it will be everywhere. So staying organised, very much so, like I've spoken about with the costume dungeon, keeping it all organised on the walls, and then moving out of the dungeon when it was when we didn't have enough room. Once again, having the whiteboard in the barn field, keeping everything clean, clean and organised. I took extensive online and physical notes, so I have notes and notes and notes and notes from run-throughs, notes from production meetings, which I can take photos and leave examples of down below, and also like both online and physical, so I had 2 different places to put them, so I could, if I didn't have a notebook, just grab my phone, if I didn't have my phone, just grab my notebook. And then also, our communication throughout the team was really good. Mabel was doing like emails every week about notes and stuff like that, so we were all in the link, but also our Snapchat group chat, so that we could instantly help each other, instantly talk to each other, instantly make decisions. So yeah, that was another key thing in staying so organised, was the communication we had, and then also myself taking those notes. My last long-term target, I have, this video is so long, is to look after my mental health. So I said I did this semi-successfully. Like I said, I got burnt out before, during the process, and after, which wasn't ideal because it meant I was potentially not working to my best. But I also got very burnt out afterwards, which isn't ideal because we didn't have a week off. Like, we had the weekend and we had a chilled out week, but I couldn't afford to just like sleep. So, I said I looked after it to the extent where I didn't like need to quit or anything like that, but I did get burnt out. So maybe something I do better, like I've already spoken about, is not spread myself so thin, not get so burnt out. I took breaks whenever I needed it. If I needed space, I took the space most of the time so that I didn't, start freaking out. I also had like a couple people in the costume team and cast that I confided in, so if I were getting too stressed, just going and having a cup of tea in the kitchen with Kieran and just chatting about everything and getting out of our system so it doesn't stay pent up, just looking after my mental health, because it's really important to look after your mental health, because you can't just have a breakdown in the middle of a thing. You are, as actors and as like costume team, we are our tool. So you would, if you were a mechanic, you'd keep your tools clean, you'd keep them oiled or whatever, you get what I'm saying. But if you're an actor, you keep yourself mentally well, or an actor or a production member. Okay, so lastly I've got ensemble and skills. So some examples of ensemble that I really liked is flute costume. So when Alan and I, and also Kieran, really pulled together quickly that day to redesign his costume, literally that day in about an hour, and then going out and sourcing it with Mabel. I felt we really pulled together as an ensemble, and our teamwork there was absolutely amazing. All of the little general tasks that we had throughout the process, and assigning tasks to different people, being able to collaborate whenever we needed to, but also being able to go off on our own. And then obviously that problem solving, we did great as a team, giving different people problems to sort out. I said that throughout the ensemble, Kieran and me took on leadership roles. I've spoken about how I did towards the end, but Kieran was often a lot of times telling Alan what sewing he needed to do still, telling Caitlin how she could do this one, taking up of the jeans, and oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna keep going. Then telling how to do dyeing and stuff like that. So he took a lot of the practical things, where I took a lot of just organizing things, telling people what needed to happen, being able to make it a good, healthy environment, things like that. We really just helped each other out a lot. So even when we didn't have to, so it wasn't within our own groups, but we still pulled together and helped redesign the lover's costume, helped source some of the lover's costumes. With the whole fairies trousers thing, it felt like every one of us in the ensemble, in the team, was working towards getting those trousers done in time. There were people cutting up fabric, there were people doing the shirts, there were people doing little hand stitches, there were sewing machines always going. And then getting shoes as well, it was constantly someone running and getting shoes, someone checking the sizes. Oh, can you just message me Amber's shoe size, and then like, oh yeah, okay, I've got it. So lots of different things of pulling together as a team. Another great thing we did as ensemble was just talking as a company. I've brushed over this, but how we responded to Nige and the creative director, how we worked with stage management and colours and props and stuff like that. And then talking to the actors, responding to any reasonable requests they had. So the dancers with the feet binding, like choose different, I've gone over this like a million different times, but talking as a whole company and working together as a company instead of as our separate groups, another great ensemble thing. So now going into skills, oh my goodness. No, not going into skills. Sorry. What did I contribute to the ensemble and the team? I obviously contributed my makeup skills, my sewing, obviously. I taught myself how to machine sew properly so that I could do it if needed backstage. I contributed makeup, sewing. I had all like the emotional and the soft and practical skills, which we'll go into later in like 2 seconds. And then also contributed that leadership role to the group towards the end. So then, if I wasn't there, I think the makeup, like, I don't want to sound up myself in this next section, but also I'm very proud of what I've done, so I'm gonna sound up myself. No. But I feel like the makeup would have been a lot more of a mess if I weren't there, because it would have been less coordinated. If it was just one person designing the whole cast, the makeup, I feel like we all do the same, like it all looked the same, they all had the same face chart, they were all working off the same thing. If that was several different people, some people would have just left them photos to work off. I feel like it was a lot more organised, and I'm not sure everyone would have been able to pull together and do makeup designs in the 4 days we had to do makeup designs in the way that I had, because like, I'm a makeup person, I do makeup all the time. I've got a real creative eye for makeup and meanings behind it, so I could pull that together in 4 days. I don't know if everyone else in the team could have. Also, if I wasn't there, a lot less organised. Like I said, I contributed a lot to that with my whiteboard, with keeping it tidy in the dungeon, etc, etc. I feel like there would have been more chaos backstage as well, and more emotions running high, because a lot of the time I was like, we need to calm down, you're stressing out too much, we can fix this, or you're taking this feedback as a personal insult. It's not. You need to not take it personally and respond to it. And dealing with the chaos backstage with, like, my whiteboard, I've said that so many times, but also running around and checking all the different dressing rooms and everything like that. That was my decision. And emotions running high, like, oftentimes I was like, take your negativity out of here. We need to make this a calm, safe room for us, otherwise it will get crazy. A lot of actors, if I wasn't there as well, a lot of actors came to me specifically because I had had the time in the workshop with them and interacted with them specifically, and they had that trust and that bond with me. So whenever they had a problem, loads of actors came to me specifically to solve it, and they trusted me to solve their problems and find an issue for that. So I don't know, without me having gone through the workshop and spoke to all the actors personally, I don't know if that bond would have been there, so maybe a lot of the problems would have been left hidden away, or a lot of them wouldn't have been talked about. Like the lover's hair, they were really worried about it, so they came to me and said, I know you're not in charge of hair, but can you, is there any way you can help? So then me going into my team and being like, who's in charge of lover's hair? They're freaking out about it, help them out with it, give them more instructions, and just solving problems and stuff like that. So there was a bond between me and the actors I don't know would have been there if I wasn't there. Right, so let's quickly go into skills, because I'm nearing on an hour for this video, and that's ridiculous. So my practical skills, I'd say, obviously my makeup, I've spoken about this briefly, how I've got great makeup skills, how I've got the technical skills for makeup, but also I've got the eye for design for makeup. I know what looks good, I know what looks bad, I know how to change it for face shapes. I've studied in my own time makeup colour theory for like undertones and what colours go well with each other. So practically, I'm really good at makeup. I also learnt to machine. So for this course, for Midsummer's, I learnt to sew on the patches because I had to. I learnt to machine sew also, so that people if something went wrong and I was the only one there who could sew because people kept taking walks in the middle of shows, so I could change that and I could be able to fix the problem. And then also my hand sewing skills, I really improved those throughout as well, because it was very quickly just need to hand sew something on and then like use hemming tape to properly stick it. Another one of my practical skills is my newly found ability to quick think. So towards the end of the process, that was really something that I noticed and was proud of. I had quick responses and quick actions for that, and then also, like I said, my keen eye for design. I will be blunt and honest if something doesn't look good. That's not just makeup, that's in general. I've got lots of notes that costume doesn't look good, needs to be changed. So different things like that, and being able to pick out what looks bad, so that's a really helpful practical skill. And then my soft skills, I've written, I'm really great at communication, because I am. And because of the nature of myself, I've always been great at understanding people and getting communication out of them and making sure that we're all talking properly as a team, as opposed to holding grudges or being like not having the correct communication we need. I've got, like I said, deep understanding of emotions and mental health issues. Because of my own mental health issues, I really get it, so that if someone comes to me being vulnerable about something about their costume or just in general, I've got the skill set and the ability to help them and to look at that situation with empathy as opposed to with like a cold calculated thing. So very human. I can also, another soft skill of mine is I can talk myself and other people down from panic attacks and anxieties. So I've gone to therapy for years and years and years, so I can stop myself and like be reasonable about my anxiety and like stop myself from getting so stressed out and worried, which was obviously really helpful throughout this process to be able to shut that voice down. But then also being able to help other people out on the team. So if someone's if their anxiety is making them be unreasonable, being able to be like, you need to realise this is your anxiety, take a deep breath. And then also I can talk people down from panic attacks, which I did a lot in the get-in week and in the tech week, talking people down, not just CAS. So obviously a really helpful skill, because you can't just have a panic attack in the middle of a professional environment. You can, but you need to be able to chill. Also, I found that I could be confided in because of that trust I had with a lot of actors, but also within my own costume team and from the stage management team, a lot of people confided in me and trusted me and used me as like a sounding off board for their own issues and their emotional issues. That's another thing. And I feel like just throughout it, I had negative moments, but I overall had a really smiley and positive attitude, which is incredibly useful. It's often overlooked, but being able to keep the rooms, a good place to be in, and being able to light up a room instead of letting it be so dark and sad, and always looking on the bright side when it's hard, when there's a million and one thing problems going wrong, being able to go, well, that's just the nature of the show. So yeah, being a happy force around the buildings that we were working in. Okay, so that was my process evaluation. So I've decided to do my performance in a separate vlog because this one's ridiculously long, and there'll be more of an overall evaluation at the end of that one as well.